practice that at all. But we're going to also do the Hangout thing, because everyone understand what's happening. So basically, Nate's going into Google Plus and creating Google Hangout, which is essentially like a video conference. And so that video conference is going to be aimed into the room for our whole session, which means that our session will be streamed on and recorded and available in the Google Plus community for this event. So when you go in Plus, there's a Google Plus community. So Google Plus is, for lack of a better term, kind of like Google's version of a Facebook or social network. There's a lot of really cool ways to connect with teachers on there, which we can talk about that too if you'd like. But so that video will just basically stream and be available while we're having a session also afterwards. Anyway. So no stress. It's your block. So
can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is something I really want to know about, because I don't have that YouTube lessons or.
I'm sorry, I just didn't hear the last part.
I would really like to use it going forward. Yeah,
sure.
The whole thing. So Google Plus, here I'm logged in. So where would I go to see any of this stuff?
So Google Plus, for native, basically. Sorry, we'll can do that for a second here, but this is a huge resource for you during the conference and also after it. You know, it's great that we're all here in the summer, but by the time we're back to our classrooms, you're going to have lost some of what you gained here. And a really cool way to avoid that problem or deal with that problem is to use Google Plus. And so this is, what you're looking at here is just a page on Google Plus. And there's a community that's built inside the service that's just for this event. And so when you join that community, you can automatically connect yourself to all the other educators that are doing it. You can find Google Plus and share them like you've done Facebook. But you can be posting things as you go into this community. And that, makes the learning stick for everybody, because then everybody has access to it. You can share things, videos. You can, so Nate's just doing a little post right now, so he's just going to go in and give it a message, and he can say who it's to. And the unique part about Google Plus is how the to piece works. So in Facebook, you pretty much ship it out to everybody. But in Google Plus, you have circles. And so when you put people in your circles, you have groups. That you can make groups for different things. And people will know that they're in your circles or groups, but they won't know which circle or group they're in. It could be more than one circle. For example, I could have my family circle. In that circle, I could have mom, dad, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, nephew. I could have a parents circle. Parents that I have. And it could just so happen that a parent could also be in my family circle. It can be more than that. You can share stuff with a specific circle, and they'll get it, but they won't know they got it because they're in that circle. So mom won't know she got it for sharing in the family circle, she'll just get it. Also, you have more control over your content, so you can turn off and share something. So in other words, I can send my family a picture of my children. Let's say I send one of my son Avery standing naked in the waiting room. But I don't want that to go any farther than my family, because that's my naked kid's butt, right? So I can turn off reshare, which means it goes to people I sent it to, and their ability to share past that is cut off. Right? So there's some unique things about Google Plus that are really handy. What I do is I get people in there for the first time, and I share a circle with you. I share my circle of Google certified teachers with you, which is 500 Google certified teachers. And instantly your Google Plus is full of just amazing. One of the main complaints about Google Plus was that it was a ghost town. People were in there and their friends were Facebook, which is true. Unless you know how to kind of connect to people and find the right people, that's how it stays. But when you learn how to share circles with people and find circles that people share, no matter what you're interested in, you can very quickly pick up that circle of whatever. Right? I mean, we're talking about ed tech here, so that's the circles I mentioned. But when I go set this up with my friends and my family, like I set my mom up with a circle of people who do quilting. Just runs those people. And so, whatever your interests are, there's probably a community of Google Plus for you, but there's one made specifically for this event. And that's where this Hangout rating And that's where you can connect with educators from your district or just from local people and share their stuff. It's just a great way to handle that piece of life. So anyway, that's kind of the lowdown on Google+. What you're looking at right now is we're inside the Hangout, and on the screen is a document. So what Nate's done is he's basically used an app inside of Google Hangouts to open up a Drive document. So now people in the Hangout can see that document. You can even screen share, you can turn the control of your computer over to somebody else. But we can be in here doing our video chatting, but also editing a document simultaneously. So there's a lot of functionality. Google Hangouts is kind of like a Skype, but there's just all these tools we have on computer. You can collaboratively do like mind maps in here. You can edit video in here, images in here. You can work on Drive documents. You can do like mind mapping with people. You can do all kinds of things inside a Hangout collaborative. For most districts, Google Plus is open to the adults only for the most part. It's, law about it. 1300. But then school districts also have to follow laws about being able to essentially archive conversations that happen in the service, which is like how they archive email. But inside Google Plus, they have the Hangouts and the chats that can't always accurately record and retain. And so a lot of the times they won't open it for kids at all because you're into legal issues there. A lot of the times we'll be able to just for adults. So we've used Hangouts with just adult accounts to do like shared read alouds and things. Do a Hangout with multiple classrooms. So there's still ways that you can use it in your classroom even if your students can't access it. So that's kind of the demo of Hangouts.
Now, as we get this session started, this is an open document that I've made public that everyone can edit, add to, and kind of just be a springboard for discussion for today's session about blended learning, hybrid learning, or personalized learning, whatever we're going to call it. Does anyone need help getting to this document?
Okay, so...
Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead, you're good.
No, I'm just going to say you can go to the Geek Camp website, and then under the schedule, this session will be listed, and that's how you get to the website for this. Does it? Let's see.
If we didn't make you a little short URL, we can.
Or, yeah, you could... if you go to this website here, so bit.ly.
Here we go. Let's do it this way.
bit.ly/P for personalized.
Not a whole lot. Oh, you're in there.
And then GK14.
There.
So if you type that in exactly as it's seen, it's case sensitive, so you'll have to make sure to capitalize the P, the G, and the K. But that'll take you to the Google Doc where we can do some collaboration on this document, and you'll have something to be able to kind of walk away with some ideas and walk away with some really good notes or resources based on our time in this session.
So just, does everybody understand what's going on right here with the building? So a lot of the times you get these huge, long URL addresses, especially like if you're in Google Docs or Google Drive. You get these really stretched out long URL addresses. And you can, make a link to them and you can have the link say whatever you want. But when you use a link shortener, like bit.ly is one of the link shorteners, it allows you to create a shortened link with bit.ly. But one thing that's cool about this particular service is that it lets you, if you sign in, it lets you design the rest of the URLs when it's not taken. And so just something fun, if you're sharing links where people are seeing you print especially, this is just a really handy way to make links easier for people. So you can do, there's a Google URL shortener, there's a bit.ly, there's all kinds of link shortening services. bit.ly is cool because it lets you do that, and also because it tracks everything, so you can see how many people click on this link and where they came from and where they went. There's all those kinds of things. Not that that's important, it's just interesting sometimes. So then we get to the site. This is a schedule should take us there. If not, we have that bit.ly. But is everybody able now to use this document?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that document will be yours. You can just go file, make a copy, and it's yours, and it's in your Google Drive and like this brand. So you can have it and take it with you well done. we decided that we should probably start with this idea of killing the jargon, like just all these different words around the topic.
It's funny because when Chris and I started the brainstorming for the session, Beth had originally asked us to look at this idea of blended learning versus hybrid learning, and Chris and I kind of looked at each other like, is there a difference? What, like, all these terms get thrown around all the time, and, as teachers, we could play jargon bingo at every PD day we go to and probably have more fun than most PD days.
Maybe more too.
Yeah. So instead of kind of going with the catchphrases and what's buzzword bingo kind of idea, we're looking at this idea of the session's called blended learning. Well, what is blended learning? It's kind of a nebulous topic. And then there was hybrid learning. Well, what's hybrid learning? It's kind of a nebulous topic. And bottom line is what it comes down to for us, as we talked through kind of what we saw as the differences between blended and hybrid, there really isn't much of a difference per se, but what they allow for is this personalized learning experience. So we decided that more so than blended learning or hybrid learning, I think the best thing to just call this is personalized learning, because it gives us this opportunity to be able to personalize the learning experiences for our students and to give them ways to approach subject matter and content in a different way for each student. So I think killing the jargon, getting rid of it and just going with something personalized learning is a lot easier.
So that's our plan. If you hear us say blended learning or personalized learning or hybrid learning or whatever we decide to call it, that's what we mean. It's our objective to make learning accessible to as many kids as possible, and that's what we're trying to do, trying to personalize their learning. And so another thing we wanted to talk about were like some of the reasons that people would choose not to do this or not want to be a part of this, because that's important, right? And so equity and access are always huge. How many of you dealing with a problem where you have kids who don't have wireless at home or access to devices, or maybe they do, but their brother and sister are on it because they're in high school, right? And so no matter where you're at, I think that everybody has to deal with this issue of, yeah, it's great, but my kids don't have it at home, or whatever reason. So, that's obviously an issue. And so there's some things we do to kind of help with access and those same things. But this idea of screen time, now that I have my own kids especially, my son is going into second grade, my daughter's going into her second year of preschool, and they're addicts already. I can't separate them from the screen without trouble, temperature, and health by them. And so there's that piece, right?
If you're looking at this document, if there's anything else that you can kind of think of, like what would be some pushback that you think you would receive for kind of trying to create a blended learning environment for your class or your students? If there's something that's not listed in this section here that you think might be some pushback or something that you would hear either from an administrator, from a parent, or even from students that you might come across, we can put that in the notes here and kind of talk about some of the ways to approach that too. So if there's anything you think of to add that.
I had a kid that it's a really hardcore security issue. It was like a non-custodial parent that was just out of prison, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
He happened to be a tech geek. And could hack into her stuff, and so she couldn't have any Google, she couldn't have any. So.
That's actually a really good point. I had a student this last year, and I've created kind of this personalized learning online for a lot of my students. And I had a student who was court mandated not allowed to be on the computer, on the internet. That was how he came to me, but after I spoke with his counselor, as long as he was monitored in a classroom environment, it was okay for him. But it was kind of, he was trying to set up that barrier for himself so he could get out of some of the work. But at the same time, having those conversations and figuring out where the security issue comes through, and if a lot of this is happening in class, I know Chris is going to talk a lot about how he did it with his students at East Elementary, but if they're doing some of these things in the classroom, it's our job as teachers to actively monitor. It's not, here's a computer, do your stuff, I'm going to be at my desk catching up on Angry Birds. You're still monitoring the learning. So if it's something that can be controlled through just monitoring their behaviors, that might be something that you could look at too. That's a good point there.
But we should do, I had a student this last year, who was in the military. She knew enough about technology to know that he knew enough to be. She had security clearance issues, but she also had fiance issues. She married the third one. She had 3 fiancés during the year. Married the third one. The first 2 had restraining orders, and before that, her husband, like his father, he also had restraining orders. And so, yeah, keeping that kid secure online was an interesting deal. And it is absolutely an issue. It's definitely an issue. It's something that can be very aware and respectful of. So what are some of the solutions? One of the things that we did was we tried to flip our classroom to understand what. So we essentially found or created videos to introduce topics. The students can watch us homework in the next day in class. They would already have some exposure to the topic. Ideally, we're trying to save ourselves a little more instructional time. Less time, giving just direct instruction, a little more time. Specific issues. But then we also made time available during lunch recess, after school, before school, for kids to come and watch the video. So we tried some things like that. Is there anything else you guys have tried as far as trying to create this content for students, but find additional time to do it? You guys had that problem?
Yeah. But lunchtime and before school.
Mm-hmm. We tried those things, and I'm sorry, actually, we should back up what we were doing.
I was just thinking that.
We just started.
When we talk about our classes.
Please listen, I know you know who I am. My name is Chris Long, and this is Nick Bass. People also I teach elementary school. We've been doing Google Apps now for, I think this will be my 7th or 8th year. I've been just one-to-one with Google Apps. Nate, how long have you been at that?
This will be my 4th year of teaching at Heritage, but I've been using Google Apps the whole time that I've taught, as well as when I was doing my undergrad, we were using Google Apps. So,
the school that I teach, people are a little in it, they just kind of do everything, which is pretty much right. It's like the step in class. But my school is not so much. It's more, we have parties in ours, so attendance are kind of the economic codes, school administrators, all that stuff. And so we have basically become the US on that. Exact percent, but well over 70% reduced lunch. And I don't really agree with putting all those kids together. I think they should be all over this. But if they're going to be in one, let's send out to school. I love it. But so anyway, that's kind of our background. Sorry. How many of you are elementary teachers? All right. Well, the cool thing about this is it's good for all. It doesn't matter what you're constantly at all. This idea about being able to personalize learning and make more time for yourself is really fun. But anyway, so the screen time issue. Nate and I were talking about this morning, and Nate was talking about how maybe there's a difference between screen time in general and then screen time that's directly learning. What do you think about that? Is there a difference there, or is it just defined differently from the screen time?
Are we talking Netflix binging, or are we talking actively learning and like researching and things online? Is there a difference to you guys?
And so that's important to know, like when you're talking to parents or administrators. It is a lot of screen time. And at first, when kids would come, or excuse me, when teachers, administrators would come into our classrooms, the first thing they would always notice was that the kids were quiet and on task. Now, I'm not saying that they're always quiet and on task because I'm so far from the truth. It's not even fun. But in the beginning, if you're very quiet, very focused, very on task. Administrators would love kids. But of course, that wears off. If you've ever known any child ever, that's what you already know what happens. It lasts for a little tiny bit, way less than you would hoped. And then the newness wears off, and now what? Right? And so engagement used to be the thing. And engagement still happens. I hope it doesn't glitch like that. It happens. But there is a lot of screen time, and there is a lot of on-task time, but there's also a lot of talking time, a lot of moving around time, doing a lot of doing brain breaks and different things like that, even a lot of moving. We try to combat those things, but it's still an issue. It's just that when we talk about it, we try to kind of differentiate between screen time in the general sense and screen time and what we do in school. And if I ever really get into it with a parent about that, my answer always is, please come see. Let me do it with us and see if you think that this kind of is valuable. Because when you start to remove it, to me at this point, and I know that I'm way out on the edge, but to me, that's withholding best practice. And that's that's a pretty hard line in the sand. Like, I think that when you are taking those things away from kids, and especially when you're taking away their ability to publish work online, you're really cutting them off at the knees. And so I fight that's the hill I'll die on. Because there's a lot of privacy issues. There's a lot of, I don't want my kids to work out in the world kind of issues. Every single year I deal with the whole situation of, my child just heard about our divorce. My child just heard about how the cops busted them for us. My child had been published it online. And knew, wrote it for that. And every year I get into that argument with the paper. I want real writing for my kids. And I want to publish online for a real audience. And I want them to see the power that that has. And so it's just another another one we thought about was just getting people on board and having people understand what it is that you're trying to do. Trying to explain how learning works or what it is to somebody who has just that model of how school used to work. That's difficult to do. They don't understand it and they don't get it. And they're like, what is going on? Where's the instruction happening? The administrator's got their checklist. Can't just walk into your room and pick off the things anymore. Because they're not always on the walls anymore. Our walls are still public, charts and paper, information and resources. But a lot of that stuff also lives online, and the stuff the kids are actually using is almost always the online version. Every once in a while, if I've got like a writing checklist on the wall or something that they're using for a specific assignment, you'll see that getting used pretty well. But a lot of the things I used to put on the walls, now the kids are getting to at home. And they're getting to them in years to come. So, for example, we had students write, like an all about me, something like that. And great, they did a great job. They did it in Google Drive. They loaded it up. It was awesome. Life went on. Well, 23 years later, those pieces started popping back up at the top of my drive. And if you use Google Drive, you understand. When somebody edits a document again, it goes up to the top of your list in your sharing folder. So you see that somebody's looking at the document. So all of a sudden, these pieces started popping back up. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? All of it. And kids are plagiarizing themselves. How cute, right? That's what's happening. Some 7th grade teacher is basically giving them the same assignment, and the smart ones are like, no problem should be solved twice. There it is. So I went in there, in the comments, and basically wrote, I won't tell your teacher, but you better revise this and make it better. I'm going to check. Right? What a cool connection to have. Because I'm still interacting with my students as they're working moving forward. And is it really a crime to plagiarize yourself? If I've already done that assignment, so I really have to do it? No, so but make it better. And I got in there and like interacted with it. It's fun. But again, they have their creation, they take it with them. Forever, they can take it and go. And when school ends, when they leave high school, there's some cool things that are happening. There are schools and districts who are essentially transplanting all the Google account data for the kids into another account. So they just take their whole, everything with them. I mean, imagine if you had every single note you ever took, every single note that you would fill, every single, all that from school, all of it. Because our kids can't. The connections that they have with their work and their connections as far as other learners. And by personalizing blended learning, I think we're finding ways to make those connections even stronger. You know, I've got probably a few friends that I've known since elementary school. Maybe a handful. I didn't have some ways to stay connected, but these guys, my fifth now. If it's about who you know and not what you know, they have the ability, if they start now, to know this humongous network that they can work with them. And so what I'm trying to do is teach them to develop that right now, just like I'm trying to do teach. I'm trying to develop it for myself. I'm teaching my kids to do the same thing. And blended learning is a big part of the way that I do that. So anyway,
one of
trying
the
to explain
things,
to people is tough.
Yeah. One of the things that I added in there on this idea of screen time in my classroom, and to like, as Chris was kind of talking about, like, come into my class and see what's happening, and then you'll become a believer. I put up this acronym SAMR. Has anyone heard of the SAMR model?
Has anybody not heard of the SAMR model? Has anybody been to any presentation in the last year that doesn't have the slide of the SAMR model?
Okay, so here's buzzword bingo, be able to check this one off. SAMR, it stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition.
You didn't even look.
If what I'm doing in my classroom with blended learning is a substitution of just paper and pencils, basically handing out worksheets in Google Docs, if that's what I'm doing in my classroom, I'm doing blended learning wrong. Substituting technology for paper and pencil is not the right way to do it. Augmenting is kind of one, more additional thought about the technology integration into your classroom. It's changing the way some of the things are done in the classroom. This is, when we talk about substitution, that's not a bad place to start, but that's not what your end goal is when you're talking about blended learning and screen time or using technology in your classroom. Augmentation is that one step above the substitution.
You bolted something on, you've added something to yourself.
Right. So we're going to use, a Google form to take a quiz, and they're going to get that feedback right away and be able to improve on it. That would be an augmentation. Modification is when you're starting to really modify your instruction to incorporate that technology. You're trying new things. And then that last step is that redefinition. So instead of, in my high school English classroom, instead of giving them a 5-page essay about an argument, I can have them create a 10-minute documentary about an idea. They're using the technology in the classroom. They're filming a documentary with their phones or their cameras or their tablets or anything like that, and doing that work in class and redefining the way I look at persuasion. Because yes, persuasion actually happens probably more in media now than in print. So that's a great skill for them to learn. It's a redefinition of those classroom ideas. So when we think about this idea of blended learning, and as Chris was talking about, come in and see what's happening. If I'm just substituting, I'm not doing my job I'm not doing them any favors. I'm just doing the same old thing, just a different way.
But it is a good place to start, though.
But it is a great place to start. We all have to start somewhere.
The thing that happens with the SAMR model and people present it by this, they make it seem like you should always be at that top level of everything. And that'd be ideal, of course, it would, right? Who doesn't want to be at the top level of everything that they do? But that's not necessarily reality, and that's definitely not where we start. So don't let it be discouraging, oh, I'm only doing substitutions.
Right.
That's not it at all. That's where I started for sure, and I spent a long time there. So don't let it freak you out. Just realize that that's kind of the trajectory we're aiming for, and think of it more like that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because it is an entry point, multiple entry points for educators to get in. And if we can establish this learning environment where our students feel comfortable trying new things, where they're not afraid of failing, then we can start moving up to these different stages. But I just think it's important to think about, like Chris said, come into my classroom and see what my kids are doing, and you will see the positives of this personalized learning, this blended learning that's happening. Go ahead.
I have a question, just because I'm thinking about my students, and they are so used to having only one right answer. How do you get them past that point of recognizing, not only do I not know what's going on, but my teacher doesn't either, and I got to figure this out?
That's great. I'm actually adding that to the arguments against. I teach honors English for my sophomores, and my sophomores are amazing at doing school.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes what I do in my classroom with this blended learning is difficult for them, because they're like, wait, you're telling me that I can create something, but you don't care what I create?
What do I do first?
What do I do first? Tell me what to do. Oh, it's amazing, and I think I don't have an answer to how do you get them to that point, other than just to keep doing it. I actually start my class at the beginning of the semester with a couple different videos, like TED Talks. One of them I show them is, what would you attempt to do if you knew that you could not fail? It's a great video about, well, that's not what it's called, but that's the message of the video. And it's about, it's failure. It's from Mach 20 to Hummingbird drone. It's actually all about science, and how all of these science and technological advancements, when we talk about moving at the speed of light, well, we didn't always move at the speed of light. And the people who were trying to move that fast, or the speed of sound, sorry, who were trying to move that fast, they failed and failed and failed and failed until they succeeded. And so even though that failure is something they're afraid of a lot of times, especially honors kids that I teach, I really try and instill in them that there's this possibility you will fail, but that failure is also going to lead you to success.
It's prerequisite, right? It's almost always failure is prerequisite to success, and not just once. The thing that, when you first asked the question, Christy, what I thought about was just this whole idea of grit, right? Like, we have all the time, and it always, to me, maybe mentioned these honors kids or whatever, but to me, it happens with GT kids. It happens all the time, especially with the kids who are less smart. Because it's been easy for them, and all of a sudden, when they get to something that's not, they don't know what to do with that.
Right.
And the fact that we have to worry about that is like testimony to what Nate said. You just have to put them in those situations over and over. But I would take it a step further and say that I have to put myself in those situations too. When you start blended learning, when you put a computer in every kid's, and not that it has to be one-to-one because it doesn't, that's my situation. When you put a computer in every kid's hand, one of two things are going to happen. One, you're going to really let the kids actually use the machines, in which case you have to change the way you teach. Because you can't teach the same way anymore. You won't have that kid listening to your life. Or two, you get scared and you take more. One of those two things is eventually going to happen. Having the computers out and open forces the issue. Every kid's got every answer in front of them. You're asking the same kinds of questions. What's the point? And if that scares you too much, you know, you go back to what you did last year that worked really well. And so you have to get through that part. That part is hard for teachers especially. That letting go of the reins and kind of do that, you know what I mean? And letting personalized learning happen, letting the kids kind of start to choose them, letting them start to ask their own questions that might not be the same as for them. You know, that kind of thing. The culture shift is huge, but it's also hard. And getting through that every learning part is always a challenge. And most teachers are just like me. And when you hit that part where it gets hard, and if you're a first grade teacher, that part might just be signed into an account. No joke. That's a huge deal breaker for first grade teachers that I am. It takes a day to get them sent in that first time. And you as the teacher, you play the long game. You know where the end point is. And every day you spend kind of in that technology swamp, you're watching days fall off the far end, right? Because you know you have to try here. And as you're watching days fall into that swamp of getting kids signed in, getting to start doing this new kind of work, trying these new things, most teachers freak out and they stop. And the message that we try to give over and over and over is you gotta go slow to go fast. If you stick with that ugly, messy, murky, swampy part, and you get through it, On the other end is the autobahn, right? Like you can cruise. In the beginning of the school year, it's always tough because I'm used to my kids from the year before, how they're finished. But I have new kids this year who won't have the same skills, and I can't walk into the room and say, all right, guys, they're open your drive. I need you to have a presentation open. I need 3 different images that you cite your sources for. I need you to make sure that they're copyright free. And I need them about this topic. I'm going to be back with you in 5 minutes. Okay, go. You can't do that on the first day. And you forget, right? But you got to go through that stage again. But if you do, you will get to the point where the workflows are amazing, and the work that you produce is amazing, and they get it out there for time, and the results are staggering. But you got to go through that ugly messy part. And for me, that ugly messy part is definitely kind of one of the tricks, one of the roadblocks, for sure.
Real quick, Chris, I think we should go around and just, if you're comfortable sharing maybe your experiences of kind of starting the blended process or the personalized learning process, or if you're using maybe a learning management system like Edmodo or Schoology or something along those lines in your class, if you want to share like why you're here and what you want to get out and what you kind of want to feel empowered with by the end of the session, that might, I think that would help us to be able to hear what you guys think and what you want to say. So let's just start over here and say, gotcha, gotcha. And just share, like what grade or what age, and then your comfort level in diving in, or if you've already got your toes a little wet or anything like that.
Well, I'm Karen. I teach deaf and hard of hearing students kindergarten, first, and second grade at Summit View. My experience is I do a lot of work with gen ed teachers, and we have some gen ed teachers in our building that are very scared of technology, and we have a couple that are pretty good at it. And so, working with the range of them, I want to be able to keep up. But I also we have a really great CRT in our building, very passionate, very excited, and so I'm with her, trying to educate others and get people on board that tech is the way to go. So personally with my little DHH kids, it is nice because there's no mind, there's nothing to hear. So it's a positive tool, can't type in Hangouts yet.
Yeah.
All the assignment pieces there, but it's a breakdown of the. But so it is nice, and then we can also collaborate with our DHH. Because we have such a small population, so we can collaborate with folks and people who are at Denver, as well as other DHA students in Douglas County that are at the home school, some of the families. So that part helps.
Very cool.
I'm trying to help the gen ed teachers. I really like the idea of creating the building up their e-portfolio that sort of follow them. So everything that I do with my little kids, and then pull out a resource plan and make sure I do it in Drive, so they can take it back to the gen ed teacher to see, or the parent as well. So it kind of helps me with documentation as well, like that.
Very cool. That's awesome. Thanks.
I was a first year teacher last year, so literally everything was getting on this. I teach at CT. I teach 7 different social studies. So my school is completely normal. So everything that they do is completely normal. We get a whole lot of that. God, we're super engaged right in the beginning when they first got it. This was the first year. They completely told me, this is my place. And then not so much. I'm just actually trying to figure out how to do this. There's 2 next door. What's that? So I'm trying to figure out how to better utilize last time for kids to come. Actual, we did 2 last year, and they were very.
I did one last year too. Amazing.
What was it, mock trial?
Mock trial.
Oh, mock trial.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay.
That was kind of my goal. I want my classroom back. I want my time back to Mr. Rodman. It was all selfish. I want my room back, and I want to be able to play my phone with my kids. Because I can do some of this other stuff all the time, maybe. Kind of.
They learned at the same time as I
Right.
did.
All the time.
Just trying to figure out, like, okay, this is how you see an assignment. This is what you do on Kia, this is what you do on Edmodo, this is
how we log on to this. Figuring that out was great. What I'm actually trying to figure out mostly is for actually how to work in the primary sources in a way that doesn't have
Yeah, because they require a lot of support.
I'm trying to figure out a better way. In Hangouts, I teach elementary Spanish, and one of the problems that we face, elementary Spanish teachers never have enough time with kids. To really get a kid fluent in Spanish, they need 10,000 hours.
Right.
Trying to get, we get 40 minutes of class with me, and we subtract 10,000 minus 40. I'm almost there. So, I'm looking for ways, and I've kept pushing this over the last 7 years, you know, have mom and dad put this the Rosetta Stone for $70. Have them doing that at home, getting them stuff on Edmodo too, links, activities, you know, all on the Edmodo, so that we can get that 10,000 hours cooking. And I got a wide variety of support. Whatever the parents were on board with got done. Whatever they weren't on board with didn't get done. So, yeah.
Remind me before you leave to, if you aren't already, connect you with a gentleman named Noah Geisel.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know him?
I don't know him, but I certainly know of him.
Okay, for sure. For sure. We definitely get you connected with Noah if you want. And another thing too is, you're in this district, right? You don't take too much. Have you ever seen her do her presentation on Google Voice?
No.
Google Voice is a tool that essentially you get a Google phone number, and then it can be, you have people call that phone number instead of your cell phone or your phone. And you can decide what happens to that call, where it gets routed. It can get routed to all of your phones, your work phone, your home phone, your school phone, and what time it is. You can have it do certain things with a message. Like, I don't check voicemail anymore. There's a million things you can do with it. Like, the reason I say go to the Tiffany about the course is because there's a lot of things you can do as far as second language. Getting that oral practice and communicating it back to you, because when they call that phone number, they can leave you a message, which can be some of their practice. And then you essentially just check it out.
Yeah, I think somebody was doing that at Grandview. They were using that for some of the assessments.
Cool.
You know, do your assessment.
Yeah.
I'm a Spanish teacher, I'm sorry, I have to a freshman middle school with the family, and I use Google Voice for the speaking test.
Nice.
Speaking quizzes. So I can hear them, I have daily time, yeah, it's very good.
And you have that documentation piece as well. And this is right there, that's what
Yeah.
you can do.
Yeah, we definitely need the documentation. So I've been using mostly videos, iPhone, like
Sure.
iPods, iPads, having kids video their work. Like when they went to the Spanish speaking restaurant and ordered in Spanish, I video it and sent it to me.
Cool.
Things like that, but I haven't done much with Google Voice.
So definitely something to check out for sure. I don't have that included on here, but definitely. Cool. Yeah.
I took 11th, 6th grade at Hangouts Elementary, and I took civics and social studies at UC Center.
Nice.
And other apps that I can add them to implement the reading and how I something how to say information on but mostly it's just management.
Yeah.
People, you know, all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, for sure. We can definitely talk about just with managing all that information. Yeah, it's a huge thing. You know, we have that exactly in there somewhere. Yeah. How many people have used Schoology or Edmodo or anything like that at all? How many people have no idea what those tools are? Who's more than
I used to teach at Castle Rock Middle and Sultana. I am.
For sure.
It's one of those things where so many skills that need to be taught that they're all at different levels. And I would love to say, hey, you know what? Let's do projects and, you know, you're incorporating this and let's meet at one-on-one time. We'll work on that. And those who got it, you just go. And I'm trying to figure out how to balance that where everyone's needs are met.
Yeah.
Because I'm not skill and drills teacher. I'm just trying to figure out, honestly, how to put my to do project-based learning and incorporate technology. Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable. I'm just like, okay, you guys have any technology skill? You guys have any here? And I'll just make sure you know it too.
Yeah. Well, it's the $1,000,000 question, right? How do you design these environments? And that's personalized learning we're talking about. Where each kid can get what you need, universal learning design, right? The idea that I can design this learning experience to meet every single kid's needs. And that technology is a way to help you do that. You have to know a lot of this work. You have a lot of experience in technology. You have that time to play. A lot of that, I think, is from learning in front of your students. I make mistakes in front of my kids every single day. I don't teach technology. I teach good technology, and they see me do it. They see me write blog posts. So I don't ever teach them how to do it correctly. They see me add to our website. I don't ever teach them to do it correctly. I just do it in front of them. It's like model that we follow. They're going to pick it up fast. Sure. Way faster than I was prepared for. And then when they pass you up, you got to be ready for that too. But definitely, this is our question. How do I organize all this and do something valuable? Who's next?
I'm Jean, teach 6th grade math, and the last couple of years we've been allowing and letting the kids experiment all their own devices, ICT devices, and to monitor that is a huge thing because when they're on their own devices, they have little tricks that they do and all kinds of stuff, and they don't always know. So they are, getting off task, that kind of stuff. But I have found that if you put some structure up front with them, that most of them will stay on task and do what you ask them to do. They find cool things to add to some of the stuff that you ask, or it's like, oh, Miss Henry, look at what I found. Look at how I got here. And you're like, how good is that source? Check it out. But then I did Edmodo a couple of years. I didn't do it last year, and I found that it was a good tool to put stuff out there for the kids and that. But there's, I do some assessments through Google, through a couple of other apps I found. Anything you can find to keep them in their own world, I found makes a difference with them. My kids are so tech savvy, and so taking it away from them is just going to really mess them up. Yeah. So, yes, you're going to have one or two kids that are going to get options and stuff, but it's not the option. And I'm finding that using the technology to enhance what I'm trying to teach, or sometimes just going into some other app, especially with math. I'm teaching them how to do algebraic equations, and they're watching, and I'm using technology showing them how, and then they can find some, YouTube that's showing them how to do it. They sometimes understand that better than what I'm trying, and I want to know there's more than one way to do this thing. So
right. YouTube is teaching our children.
Yeah.
Don't you ever doubt it for one second.
It is.
YouTube is the teacher we never had.
Yeah, and he's teaching them, all kinds of things, and I'd rather see him pulling up a, algebraic equation on YouTube than him doing something else. And you just have to get the parents on board with him signing personalized device deal, that they bring it. The first couple of weeks we got a couple of kids with their iPhones and their different phones and iPods, and they bring all kinds of devices, and you just got to figure out how to get them to where they need to. So I didn't really have all your kids, because at Christmas time,
So just to circle back, here's the power of Google Plus and Hangouts. I don't know if you noticed this. Noah's actually hanging out with us. So Noah, who we were just referencing about foreign language, he says he's been using SoundCloud more than Google Voice right now. But he says that the Google Voice is better for students contacting teachers. But also, you were talking about project-based learning, and he added a link to all of his resources that he has for project-based learning. It's kind of hard to read, but yeah, his video. Thank you, sir. Thanks, Noah. Here, we'll make it big so you can say hi to everyone. See, there's Noah.
My battery's about to die, sorry.
No. But so there's the power of those hangouts. And good. It's funny that we were talking about Noah and he's sitting there listening to us the whole time.
I was flattered.
I would love to do that stuff, but you know, I'm still in that overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
When we talk about many different things, I'm like you. My kids, like any class they don't trust them if they're in class, if they're not. I just tell them all students I leave my job because they're meetings. But I think it's important that trust is there because we have to be clear. You know, you leave it open and figure it out. I've been overwhelmed. I'm sorry, I don't know, but I've been overwhelmed with managing. So here I've still got in my Google account. I'm sitting there looking at them and thinking about, did I give the kids timely responses to how well they did? Was I able to really do a good job of grading them and giving them back an accurate assessment? And then the parents don't get this. They don't get it. I'm sorry, I meant eighth grade. And we rewrote the curriculum for our eighth grade students, so our textbook has features. We use a lot of the online, let's check your skills, you know, what you need to remediate, and make it your job to get up to grade level before we really teach you the grade level skills and everything was finished in the project. So there were folks who are building now on our book, and we don't have I'm going to do the same thing. So the reason why I'm here is to really see if I can fine-tune what we did last time.
Sure.
But get those folks, the parents on board. That's why anytime I can videos, we have a lot of absences. Their advanced competition, you know, things like that. So anything, any activity that I could do that would help them get caught up in their lessons, we remediate those basic skills because we do feel if they're coming into an eighth grade class, we don't fail or go. So I have kids in fifth grade, you go back and forth.
Right. Well, and now this whole teaching for mastery business.
I'm sorry,
I just now because of where the standards are at, this whole issue of teaching for mastery now that you know, how many of us are using spiraling curriculums where we may never really get the spiral. You know, like, yeah, very, very good issues. I hear a lot of how do I organize myself in this situation. So we can talk about that too. But let's finish these up.
I'm Michelle Lynn. I teach technology at an elementary school. So a big part of my job is get these teachers connected. So I would just come here on the ideas for helping them. You know, give them a little bit, because that's the hardest part, very literate staff.
So what we'll try to do here in a minute is just try to throw a whole bunch of tools and resources. I'm sorry I feel like this beginning part here is done slow for us, but it's important.
My name is Allison Klein, and I work at Social Studies. So I dip a little bit into my website. My biggest frustration is I teach a class that really should be 5 years. I teach it in 1 year, and I always feel like I have to get something happen. We have content skills, but we don't have skills for content. So I'm trying to find that happy medium where I get content at home and then content like skill classroom.
Sure. That's awesome.
I'm Christy Steele. I teach fifth grade, and I started trying out a little bit of flipping and blended learning last year, and really exciting in the very beginning, and then, you know, I got bored with it because the newness wore off. And it's finding that way of how to keep my sanity and make sure I know what everybody is doing, and not letting anyone veer off too far. And as for someone was asking about primary source documents, I use them with my fifth graders, and Google has this thing, and it will read the document to the kids, an extension for it, and that was really helpful for a lot of my kids who couldn't actually read the text, but they were able to access it because it was being read to them, so they could have it read to them at home before coming to school, so that when you sat down as a class to read it, they already had some idea of what we were talking about.
I don't know how many of you guys use Living I mean, you are who's not using it? I know they've got those big chunks of work time.
Yeah.
If you're interested in, like, maybe we can throw down like a little conference session or something. There's stuff in the schedule. We're happy to have times that you want to do those things. I think Beth has been having some for a couple of sessions, but if there's something else we'd love to be happy to got resources for pretty much anything. So just let me know. But yeah, cool. So
I was thinking if we heard a lot about this idea of how do you manage and how do you kind of stay sane with all of this information, and especially if you're trying to shift into this blended learning idea of more computer time, and how do you manage all that? I think a good starting point, and it's on the bottom of this doc on the sum of our ideas here, is I think, if I can learn how to spell management, which I'm spell, I think Edmodo and Schoology are two great starting points for this process into blended, hybrid, personalized learning. What they are, they're learning management systems, which allows you to have a classroom set up within this website. They act very much similarly to Facebook. So if you're a Facebook user, it kind of is pretty intuitive. But what they do is they allow you the opportunity to assign homework, to assign quizzes, to do polls, to have threaded discussions. There's pros and cons to both of them. I'm not going to say one is better than the other because they're really different. But I will say that there is a lot of opportunity as an entry point into this through Edmodo and Schoology, because you can set up a class and everything kind of is housed in one location. Google Apps can be very useful, and in fact, I've shifted from I used to use Schoology. Now I don't even use either of those, and I just use only Google Apps. And there's ways that I make it work for me. But as an entry point, Schoology is a great resource. Edmodo is a great resource for jumping in. In fact, what I'll do, I'll show you one of my classes that I had set up in Schoology.
is everybody familiar with Schoology? So that's free. You go sign yourself up as a teacher. You can make a class or classes. You can drop students in there. And you can use Schoology for things like record, deliver assessments. You can, create additional classes of students. They have their stream that was kind of like a social network. Schoology, their strength from when I used it really was more in their ability to deliver all sorts of different types of assessments. They had some options in there that you can find in your sheet.
So as I'm pulling up an archived class that I have, and you can see kind of already, it does just look like Facebook. I mean, you've got a profile picture that I have for my class. You can update statuses. There's a wall, and over here is where they can access things for the class. But as a starting point, what I was able to do was under materials, you can create folders that they can access. So we do daily grammar practice. So I had a folder of just DGP for the semester where they could access all of the resources that we used in class for daily grammar. And that was a way for me to kind of extend that learning for them. We covered it in class for, like we've all said, time is an issue. I can't spend a whole class period on grammar every week. I would be lost. But I have those resources in that folder. Also with the ability to assign assignments through Schoology is then I am giving them an assignment, and let's see. The assignment then is sent to them, and they can have this app on their phone or a tablet, or they can just access it online, and it'll send them an alert, say, Mr. Yubowski just set up an assignment that's due on Friday. And so they get alerts about these things. So then I have, let's say, just this assignment, my intro to blogging from a couple of years ago, and then I have all of this submissions. I received 27 out of 27 submissions. So there's a way for you to be able to get that information. One of the things that I like about Schoology is they separate it. So not only can they submit assignments, but it then tells you as a teacher, does it need grading? Did it come in late? Does it need to be reviewed? And there's all sorts of options to be able to manage that and to look at who's turning in assignments, who's turning them in late, who's missing assignments, things like that. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do with Schoology. They can add comments, they can have discussions, but it's just a good entry point. We could do a 2-hour session on Edmodo and Schoology, and unfortunately, we don't have that time, but we can allow time for playing with one or the other if you want. We can kind of look through those too. So that's
Edmodo is a lot the same. If you use it or not, it's very similar to the same concept. The strength in Edmodo for me when I used it was the ability to have a class. But inside that class, I had, the group, and they were flexible. I could try kids in and out real easily. If the group was reading a certain book together, or if I had a small group that was working on a certain strand of writing skills, or whatever it was, I could very easily make a group inside my class and send things directly just to that one group. So, just to really oversimplify, you need to have a very relevant group inside your classroom. And in Edmodo, that's a really easy thing to have. In Schoology, when I tried to do it, I had to build all these separate classes, and it was a more involved process. And just having my class and moving kids in not a small groups. And so this is how Edmodo looks. They've got a lot of new stuff that just has come out recently that deals with standards-based activities. They've got kind of like they don't call it an app store, but that's essentially what it is. Really well-made activities. Simulations, mock activities, a lot of activities as far as like grammar and typing practice and all sorts of different pieces. But same idea, you go in, you've got your feed, kids can see what part of groups they're in, and there's communities. You can make a note or an alert or an assignment or a quiz or a poll, you can take pictures, you can have a calendar that you can work with. It's just a way for you to manage and organize your class. And it works for a lot of people. A lot of people really love Schoology. It's something you can implement on your own. It doesn't take a whole lot of work. If you ever use Facebook, you're pretty familiar with how the system works. I think Edmodo is a little tiny bit simpler than Schoology, but they're pretty much the same. And so that's one of the ways in which you can help yourself to be organized. And I think they both integrate with Google Drive.
Yep.
Which is really handy. Like you said, everybody here is using Google Apps. And so those are definitely some good tools to start with. A lot of people now, you can go to sessions where it's really just how do I use Drive as my LMS, my learning management. And this last year, that's pretty much what I did. Like I said, I teach in a 5th grade classroom, and managing Google Drive was my main hard part. A lot of teachers freak out about that inbox just being inundated with mess.
180 students per year.
Right, when you get those assignments turned in. And so How many people feel like that's an issue for you? Like I Google Drive, organization management. So I can give you a couple of tips and tricks there that are helpful. And if you want, I can way dig into my Drive and actually show it to you. But it's actually pretty easy to explain how to do it. So on the first day, we get kids into Google Drive and we sign in, and it takes forever, and I'm cursing myself for using technology. But once we get them signed in, the first thing we have them do inside Google Drive is they go into Google Drive, and they click the red Create button, and they make a folder. Now, I just have my kids. I teach fifth grade, so I've got 23 kids, and that's my group. My teammate and I, though, we share our classroom quite a bit, so usually we keep the whole fifth grade kind of in one space together, and we share tools and stuff. So I'll have a class with 60 kids in it. And I'll have each of them create this folder in Google Drive. And it will just be their last initial and their first name. Last initial, first name. We call it the file cabinet folder. They create it. They share it with myself, my teammate, our parents, our student teachers, whatever adults that we have. Their parents. Their parents know the rest of their life. They share it to all those adults, and they give us edit access. Does everybody understand what I mean by edit access? So you share a folder with people you can choose, and they just see it, and they come, and they edit. So they give the adults edit access. So I always have overriding power, as do all the other adults that have been shared this folder. Okay, so now all those folders are shared with me, to my school account. Because not only do I have to manage all the kids, but I have to manage my 4 different Google accounts too. So I'm in my school account. I go and I get all those folders, and I make myself a folder that's called Easter Egg Den. So I'll put Easter Egg Den file cabinets 2014, 2015. Now I'll drag all those kids' file cabinets into that folder. So I now have a folder in my drive. It holds all of my students' file cabinets for me. The file cabinets are named last initial, comma, first name, so it matches my grade. As we move through those first weeks of school, we get to the reading class. The reading folder. I drop in my file cabinet. Everything they put in that file cabinet shares with permissions, which means it's shared with me and I have that access. I don't have to do that every time. They just drop it into the right folder and it's shared. That's how they turn it in. They basically do the drop on. As the year goes on, inside reading they might have fiction and nonfiction. Or they might have the comprehension strategies. The folder hierarchy can go as deep as you want. It all starts with that file. So by the end of the year, inside that file cabinet folder, they've got all their content areas, all their units, all their best work. And I've got them all in one nice neat little tiny place. And when they drop a document into that folder, it doesn't say anything. So now, I don't have that crazy inbox mess. I can access all of my kids things whenever I want. I'm not carrying that great big bucket of notebooks. Kids can't lose it. And inside Google Drive, there's all kinds of things that I can do as far as feedback. You guys heard of Kaizen? Kaizen is an extension that you can add onto the phone that allows you to give audio feedback. So what you do is, you're in Chrome, you get a little Kaizen extension, you click go, and you've got your kids, whatever, on the screen. Whatever it is. And you read it out loud and give the feedback. You just walk your way and talk your way through their work. And Kaizen records you and keeps track of what's happening on the screen and your life. And you then click stop. The kid still has their paper, it's still there every time they Google Drive. But now it's attached to it is your audio feedback. It can literally watch you go through their essay, listen to your thinking. You can go through and make changes or comments or edits because it's in that folder, which means it's editable by you. And so in one swoop, right through that thing, you just go through and rework and redo and talk or whatever, however you want to provide feedback. And then you just have it and you haven't ever. The then that file cabinet, later on, at the end of the year, it's full of all those kids and all that work at the end of the year. I take the 2014, 2015, I drag it into file cabinets, archive. So I only ever have one folder with the veteran stuff. But it's always there. And I just like to make it bookmark. That's how I go back to all my work. Their desk, clean, whatever. Right? So that's how we organize Google Drive, and it's really simple. Really simple. There's also, you could go into Google Drive and get into documents and Google Class folders, so you can mess with that. That's a little more easy.
I just added a link onto the document here about that process. So I basically just summed up what Chris was saying about what he does, creating the file cabinets, walking through that with the students. I can't do that with 190 students. It just would, my mind would go numb. So I use Doctopus. It's an add-on which automates the creation of folders and sharing of documents with students. This is a really in-depth walkthrough that I put together that you can use or you can experiment with. It's really great, but it does take a few steps to get it set up before you can launch it with the class. If it's something you want to play with, look through that walkthrough, or you can talk to me maybe at one of the campfire sessions, or I'm in the unconference space and I can show you how I use it, because it really does save me a ton of time as far as doing all that with my students.
Yeah.
I just want to add on to that. I love documents.
Yeah.
Because you basically have a spreadsheet and you just click on
Right
each
down the
individual
line.
document. I don't lose it either.
Yep.
But what I love about documents so much is the differentiation. Because I have like my higher than high kids and my kids that it takes a few.
Right.
So I have 5 levels of differentiation. Plug in a group and it makes their own document and sends it to the one that they use.
Yeah.
Super cool.
It's Jen, right?
Yes.
So one of the things Jen is talking about, there's basically 2 functionalities to this add-on. Doctopus, the add-on, is a digital photocopier. So you take a Google document or a spreadsheet or a Google slide presentation, and you can share it with your students. Just with the touch of a button, you just hit share, and it creates all those sharing permissions automatically with those students. That's the first functionality of it, is it works as the digital copier. The nice thing about it, though, is you can differentiate it, like Jen was saying, is you can set up different group numbers. And let's say you have 4 different groups, whether it's different projects or different ability levels or reading levels or anything like that, and you can assign which group gets which document. So you can kind of scaffold and differentiate those assignments for your students. The second part of it, which kind of falls in line with what Chris talked about with the file cabinets, is you have the opportunity to create those file cabinet or Dropbox folders automatically through Doctopus. So then it does both. So it is a little big. I mean, the opportunities are great and endless, but as far as if you've never messed with it, I would recommend just looking at the functionality of it first. There's some good YouTube videos at like 8 or 9 minutes that kind of walk you through the steps, or you can go through my walkthrough there.
There's a lot of amazing things. So the way that my gateway to using Doctopus was I had to give a writing assessment. We used writing, and I had to give a writing prompt. And the kids were allowed to do it on a computer. Since I've never going to take a writing test even with a pencil or paper. Maybe it's time. I don't know. But my kids were smart enough to know they had 2 days to write, and they knew that they could go home and work on it, even though they were only supposed to have 2 class periods for the assessment of the group. So I'm like, guys, you can't do what you're not allowed to. And I'm like, well, yes, we can. And I'm like, no, you can't. I have Doctopus, right? I have Doctopus. It will generate those photocopies and share it with their own copy, but I'm still the owner until I say otherwise. So it's yours, it's in your drive, you can edit it, but I'm still the owner. With Doctopus, I can turn access on and off. So I can ship out all your documents to you. Say, where you say, well, you've got 60 minutes. At the end of that 60 minutes, I can click a button and turn it off. It's still yours, it's still in your drive, you can even see it, but you can't edit it. So we won't be able to work on the new home. I'll have to come back tomorrow, I'll turn it back on, do it. Kid said, "No, Mr. Moore, we can still see it. We'll just go file make a copy and keep working on it. Come back to school tomorrow and copy and paste from our copy." And I looked at him and I said, "I'm so proud of you. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. And tomorrow, I will not see anybody copying and pasting, okay?" And I said, "Yes, Mr. Moore, we will not be caught copying and pasting tomorrow." What am I going to do? I literally couldn't stop him from that. But I can turn it on and off. And then the really handy part was rubric. So rubric is another piece of documents. Goobric.
Yeah.
And I took my Lucid Pockets writing rubric and I entered it into this rubric thing, which is another extension. Or in Drive, sorry. And now they take that rubric, which was a pain in the butt to type at one time. But once I did it, it's done forever and I have it whenever I want. I can attach that rubric to every assignment. Do documents, click the button, choose my rubric, I choose my class list, it drops the rubric onto every single assignment. I can fill the rubric in right there on their assignment, online. It just pops right up for me, I fill it in. And add my feedback, I can type my feedback in addition to making the scores. And the scores work, and it generates me a spreadsheet, or a page on my spreadsheet that I already have, which has all my scores. And on my feedback. It also drops a copy of that rubric and my feedback onto their document. When it's all said and done, I click another button, and I give them ownership of their document. I can recreate it. If they resubmit it, I can rubric it again. It'll put the newest one on there, it'll keep the oldest one, and you can dictate which score it uses in the spreadsheet every time. So not to get super ultra crazy, but the idea is there are ways. Whether you do it with the file cabinet idea, and it's just doing your little class in my right? Or you do the steroid route, and you start using documents on the way up, and you start using all these additional add-ons and tools, and we can help you with all those things. But those are some of the main ways to organize our life.
I have a question. I thought I heard somewhere that Google is coming out with their own sort of like Edmodo.
There's
like
a session
fall.
happening right now. It's called Intro to Google Classroom.
Okay.
I'm going to be a part of Google Classroom. So I'm going to do it crazy excited about it. So it's going to be amazing. Google Classroom is Google's version of Edmodo, for lack of a better explanation. Google's policy is release early and iterate often. So what they've released right now is just a really basic thing. What it does right now is it essentially gives you a way to get a class list into the central Google Classroom. And then you can ship assignments out to your kids. But you make the assignment and it ships it out to them and that's the end of it. That's it. When they complete it, they can mark it as done and you can see it and mark it as done. There's also a social stream, so like Edmodo has or like Facebook has, or you can write their post to stream for the class. Right now, that's just about all it really is. Everybody's really hyped up and excited about it because it's the next Google thing. I'm excited about it too. I don't know why, of course. But right now, that's really all it is. It's extremely basic. It's going to be amazing, I'm sure. I'm sure that in 2 years from now, none of us will ever know how they live without it. But right now, it's really basic. It's turning that assignment, having that social stream, that's about it. But I'm sure that we'll take off and you can.
And as far as Google Classroom goes, there are some select people who have already received like the early invite for it so they can play with it or teach people about it. And I believe that's how Mark Blair and Meg Blaze in another room down the way are using that. Google Classroom will officially launch in August of this year. So the nice thing is it's early enough for Colorado schools to be able to start using it. Bad thing is there won't be a lot of time probably to play around with it and to kind of learn it before you use it. But from what I've seen on videos and a brief tutorial in a session before, it seems like it'd be really basic enough to be a really good entry point into this management idea.
How many of you have students that live in a different domain? Like their email address is different than yours? If that's the case, Google Classroom is that's gonna be your first roadblock. The way that Google Classroom works is it all has to be in the same domain. Right? So like for me, I have an adult school Google account and I have a kid at school Google account. And that was just part of the way we transitioned over. And so that's the first roadblock for classroom. You have that situation. If your email is the same indeed as your kids is, then you're in the same domain, and it's going to just be like started. But if not, then we're going to have some issues. So, but yeah, that's Google Classroom. It's definitely coming, and it will be a way to organize your life for sure. And so those are some of the main things we do. Is there anything else that anybody's had success with as far as just kind of ways to be organized and sane with this whole, pretty much essentially paperless is what we're talking about. That idea of how do I organize all this stuff without my file folders? Any other thoughts or suggestions or questions?
I use a group of Google Form often, so when kids, whether it's a blog post or anything with a web address, because then it's in a spreadsheet.
Yep.
I like to use it. It's very similar to a Dropbox, but it is all on one spreadsheet.
Nice.
Click, go, click, go.
Dr. Push works extremely well with that too. Yeah, so what it does is instead of having them fill out a form to like turn in their assignments, and having it on that spreadsheet, it actually has the class roster, and when you share that document, it puts a link to that document on that spreadsheet too. So it's really convenient, to go through very easily.
How many people are using Google Forms in general in the classroom? If you're not using Google Forms, definitely something you should look into. There's a lot of ways to kind of streamline what you do, or records that you have to keep, things like that, using Google Forms. One example for us, on our classroom blog, there's a page of forms, and we need a reading conference form and a writing conference form. And anytime I have a volunteer, or an adult, or a high school kid, or whatever, the first thing I ask them is, here, read this kid. But I didn't know what was happening, because there was someone else in the well, now I get in my computer and I just have it set to that page. And I say, as you're reading this week from this form, it's really simple. I would go like, what are pages did you read together? What did the kid do well? What would you like to see do better? That's it. Nothing super technical, maybe a multiple choice question if you see the kid use any of these class strategies. But real simple. And that way, if I read with the kid, or if a volunteer reads with the kid, or if anybody reads with the kid, or has a writing conference with the kid, I get that data collected. And then when it comes time teacher conference time, or work time, what have you, I can quickly go to my spreadsheet, sort that stuff, just that kids, have some anecdotal data. It's just just one more way to collect some of those things that are happening. One of the things for me in technology is really beneficial is I'm able to capture those moments that I couldn't have otherwise. And a lot of that happens with screenshots, actually. We can get there. So anything else, though, as far as just organizing things, saying we're doing that?
How do you know when a kid has turned in an assignment in their drive? Because I use the same kind of thing, as I use the folders. All the kids share everything through a folder. But my biggest roadblock with that this past year was, how do I know when they've turned it in?
So I guess for me, what happens is if something has a due date, that's when I go look for it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. And that's it. And I'll make a list of kids who didn't turn in whatever, and we'll rank their room or something. But a lot of the times the work doesn't have due date, like it's something that they're. And so most of the time, what will happen is they'll just tell me, Mr. Morgan, look, I just sent you this, or I just shared that. And that's usually what happens for me, is they just tell me. Then I don't have a cool answer.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering.
One of the things that I just put on there is just some of the issues that I'm going to put that on there. Like this known issues of problems that you might come across. One of the things that I've come across is this idea of turn-in times. Like if you are having a specifically assigned due date for an assignment, one of the problems I've come across with is it due when class starts? Is it due by midnight on that day? Is it due by midnight the night before? Like there's all of these things because the internet allows everything to be time-stamped. So what I would recommend doing, and what I've done, is establish it and keep it the same for all of your classes for the whole year. I've done it two different ways. I've done a due date as it's due on Tuesday. As long as it's in by 11:59 at Tuesday night, I'll accept it as on time. But I've also set it up so the timestamp for each class is exactly when class starts, just as if they were doing homework. to hand in. I'm not saying one way is better than the other. Personally, due dates are important, but I care more about the work they're doing a lot of times than actual having it turned in on time. So the difference of, a noon turn-in time when class meets versus the end of the day, chances are I'm not going to be looking at it before the end of the day anyway. So I like just setting up the day. Another thing that I put in there is providing timely feedback, because you're getting a lot of things at once on a computer. Providing timely feedback if you've been on a computer all day. You don't want to look at the screen all day. Some of those things are an issue. And then the last thing that I put in there are computer issues. My printer ran out of ink, or my printer wasn't working, quickly replaced the dog ate my homework. And now I don't have my students printing anything. So it didn't work for me is now the dog ate my homework. Exactly. So here is one solid way. Computer issues happen. I have computer issues all the time. Here is one solid way, one little nugget you can take away. If you are having students submit something online, to get around this issue of my computer didn't work, tell them to take a screenshot of the issue and email it to you, or have it ready for you the next day in class. That will get rid of probably 75% of my computer didn't work. Because now they have to prove it. So that's one little nugget that I learned last year, is I had no way to say, okay, just turn it in when you can. I had no way of being able to validate what they were saying. So that's one thing to take away, that if you're going to start turning things in online, have that kind of backup plan. If your computer starts having issues, take a screenshot. Their cell phones can take a picture of it if they can't figure out how to do a screenshot on the computer. There's so many ways that they can document their issue. And so teaching them to be problem solvers, that's part of the reason why I do it. I want them to be able to try and figure it out first.
Great piece.
Yeah.
Right. How many of you guys use screenshots? We use screenshots for everything.
Good. Oh, excuse me. Good. Do you want to talk about the sum of our ideas section about the station rotation that you did, sure, as well as maybe some of the opportunities for flipping?
Some tools for these guys to
yeah.
So real quick, the thing he's talking about is this whole rotation model. So when you hear about blended learning, personalized learning, there's essentially a few different kind of models that we follow. One of them is this idea of the rotation model, which is essentially centers, right? It's where kids are moving from the station to the station to the station to the station. And that's loosely referred to as the rotation model. And some of those stations will have a teacher, some of those stations will be independent work, some of those stations might be free choice kinds of things. But that's the idea. And that's what my teammate Nicolette and I tried. And we tried it across the board pretty much, but we, I would say, had the most success probably in math. So it's just the two of us. We have 2 classrooms. And what we did was we took a goal, a learning target, a standard, or what have you, whatever the objective, whatever you call it. And we backwards planned it. We planned out about 9 or 10 activities to support that learning target. We took those activities, and a few of them we had to teach directly to whole groups that didn't see how it's going to go. But most of them, the kids pretty much kind of knew what they were going to do the most part. We used some different tools to create those activities. We did some of them paper pencil, some of them technology, some of them are like direct instruction with a small group. There's a wide variety of how we build those activities on what the learning target was and what our students used. But then what happened was students would come in for math, and for the first X number of minutes we used a resource called SumGuide, which basically represents like fact practice, drill, and stuff. But it tracks their growth and progress, and it lets them know what standards and skills they're working on. It's adaptive. So it works with kids because they're assignments to account. So it's giving them exactly as far as that really else. So they come in, they do that for like 10 minutes or whatever, and then we'd start moving them through these rotations. And what we had was we had myself, my teammate, my student teacher, and then a paraprofessional who's actually a certified ESL teacher. So there was 4 adults. We put 2 adults in each room. So there was the 2 adult activities in each room, and then there was a few additional independent things in each room. We had, in between the 2 rooms, we had this huge hallway. We put up these great big charts, those pocket charts. centered script project. We put the activities on one, we put the kid names and groups on the other, we group the kids based on their needs, or based on different abilities, or based on behaviors, or based on whatever. But we just stood in the hallway and shuffled kids' cards around. So when they walked in the morning, they saw the groups. So then we put up a thing on the board that said group 1 goes to this station, group 2 goes to this station, and so on and so forth. And the kids moved through these stations. Well, we had enough stations, but they would go through this room all the way through, and then this room all the way through, and it would take 2 days. By the time they were done, they would have done all these different activities. Now, there was a lot that went into planning that because our lowest students needed to be in the teacher groups first, right? Because we needed to give them that direct instruction before we set them up with them doing practice. So you had to think about that. Some groups, the kids could start at a place where they were doing some independent practice, because they already had the skill pretty well done. So you had to get pretty strategic about it. But we worked it out, we got it to work, and we got it going pretty well. And the best part of it was that we got so much time with small groups of students. That was the big win for us. It was huge. We thought our kids knew all these things, and when we spend that much time with them in small groups, and then all the teachers sit down and talk, we very quickly were able to find our points that we needed to really focus on and where we needed to make changes to our groups and all those things. It was wonderful. It was like an automatic what a PLC should be. But there were also problems. Our main problem was that transition time was killing us. So we got more instructional time, actually. We got better instructional time. But we now had all these minutes of kids moving, which the moving piece was good, but there was so much transition that we knew we could do better. So our second iteration, our second goal was, well, we'll make sure that they rotate just in this room first, and just in this room first, all the way through, instead of flip-flopping back and forth unnecessarily, if that makes any sense. And then we switched it to, they'll just do activities in this room, or they'll just do activities in this room. And we were just trying to kill that transition. And a big part of that was the particular group of students that we had this past year. So, next year it'll be different. But that was kind of our foray into that rotation model. Some of the stuff that worked for us and some of the stuff that didn't. In the end, I think that it can be really, really great, but there's a lot of just training the students and being proactive about transitions for sure.
When you said there was some students that need teacher interaction first, would this be the first time they've worked with that particular skill or concept, or is there like the introduction and then
I understand your question totally. And so another way that we tried it was, because when we hit some new stuff, when we got to like some of the new fraction stuff, we kind of switched it up. So we would do like a whole group 15-minute mini lesson, and then start that rotational model. And we tried that too. And again, with varying success, just kind of depending on the unit. But we tried a lot of different things. I mean, that was the point. And the kids saw us learning right along with them, which was good. The chance to model what you're learning was good. Maybe more important than the content itself. They got to see us make mistakes. And again, that goes a long way as far as building up that culture. And they get to see how you deal with it when things don't go the way you think. And that's important. So we did that first. Yeah, go ahead.
My next question is assessment. Were they getting, did they get a big group assessment, or did they get a group assessment?
So in the end, we did final assessments on units. Right. Just like more people. But a lot of those independent stations were also formative assessments. So a lot of them are collecting evidence, showing their growth, and I have access to all that stuff. And my issue still is, how do I manage all that third party data? Never mind the stuff in my drive. I've got that pretty well figured out. The challenge for me is, how do I manage the stuff in Spelling City, and Sundog, and this website, and that website, and this website, and that website? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because I have it everywhere, it's all over the place. But a lot of those independent stations are the formative assessment that I use to make to determine the next teaching role. And so I'm actually getting a lot more assessment done than I would have before. And it's information that I have quick at my fingertips that I didn't have to grade, that I can go in and get to quickly. And a lot of it has, like, they call it heat maps or graphs or visualizations of the data. So it's even easier for me to build groups. A lot of those websites will do it for me now. They'll say, you know, here are the small groups based on your background. So it helped a lot with that question. Let's play with some tools. Are you guys ready for this? Stand up or take a break? Start ready. Take a chance to split.
Let's do a Go Noodle.
Go Noodle. And Nicolette will make mom get up and run into hurdles.
Yeah.
Do you guys know Go Noodle though? Get it right now. So I won't make you do it, but I should. So Go Noodle is this like brain breaks. You go to the website on your computer, just put it up on the screen, and it's like there's all these activities that happen on the screen that they follow along, so like they're running through hurdles, or they do I don't know. But it's just a real quick, just break, just get up and move the break. All right, let's play tools. Last chance, yeah. Sign something. Is there a like for the credits or whatever you guys? I don't know because I'm not in the district.
Just take notes in your document, and then that'll go under your.
And then if you're just doing it really like you keep writing or
Oh, okay. So, you know, just catch me anytime when what's up, you good? I'm good. Okay, cool. How much time do we have? It's 10, we're done at 10:30, right? Okay. What are you up to here, sir?
I was just going to pull up the websites.
Oh, nice, right on. So, some of the tools that we'll share are just some of the things we use. They're almost all free, or they almost all offer conversion. That's a couple for it. And if it's a pay for thing, I'll let you know. And I'll let you know why we pay for it, or who pays for it, or how we got paid for it. But for the most part, we use all free tools. And for the most part, they do a really good job of collecting that data for our students. What we do, as kids are going out into the world and signing in for accounts at different places, different websites, what have you, you want to be aware of the terms of service always for those websites. A lot of websites in terms of service will dig. There are workarounds that I did not mention aloud. The students' Google accounts in my district are owned by the district, not a student affiliated.
Say that again?
So the Google accounts that my students use are owned by the other schools. So when that account signs into a small city box, whatever, that's not the student's account. That account belongs to the school's organization. I, as the teacher, am essentially assuming parental responsibility for whatever that student does. At my discretion. So I kind of I advise you to be very aware of that issue.
What website is it that's, it's Prezi. If you actually read their terms of service, you have to be 18 to use.
I think Edmodo does too.
It's something like that. So
I think it, because they signed up 150 Edmodo kids and I told them, we're 13, look at.
yeah, and it's one of those things that our district took those steps to allow the students to be able to access these educational websites and to be able to use the features. And I forget if it was like something that had to go through the board or something that they did, but
I don't remember all
basically the district decided that the students don't own the accounts we do, which means we're adults, which means we can sign up for those accounts.
So the point is, just be aware about that situation. It is legitimate and you need to be aware.
So I
Make sure that the right people have your back. You know what I mean? When you're signing students up for accounts.
So I have all of the links that you put in there pulled up if there's anything that you want to walk through.
Nice, okay, cool. So what we do is we use the first half of the kid's email address So like if the kid's email address is their first initial, their last name at lpsk12.org, they use and their little bit of their lunch number, I think. So they get like their first initial, last name, and some numbers. And we use that whenever possible as their login to anything else that we have them log into. If there's any way for me to dictate what their username and password is, I use the first part of their Gmail address and their same password. Almost every site lets me do that. And if they don't, I will call the website or I'll get in contact with somebody, email somebody, and ask them if I can submit the list of usernames and passwords for my kids. Usually they're super cool about it. Then that way, the kids have one less account password for me. Just use the first part of their email and their password whenever possible. How many of you guys know no red ink? Okay, cool. Now remember, these are all in a document that you can go file and make a copy of, so you don't need to worry about writing all these down. Okay. But I'll just zip through all of them and just show you some of the tools that we've used. So no red ink is to help grammar practice. I would say most of their content is 5th grade and up, a little more on the up end. But the cool thing about no red ink is not only is it free and easy, but the first thing the kids do is they take a little survey about their interests. What music groups do they like? What cartoons do they watch? What are the names of their pets? What are the names of their friends? What TV shows are cool? And it collects all this information about them. And then when they're doing the grammar practice, it's making the practice items using the kids' individual interests. So it'll be an incorrect sentence about Little John the Rabbit, or about Homer Simpson, or whatever. The kids are still working on the skill set that they're supposed to be working on. But it's based on their interest, the things that they're reading. You can set it up to have it so that you are assigning practice and quizzes and things. Kids can just have a free-for-all and they can choose what they want to work on. It creates a heat map for them so they can see where they have growth, where they haven't tried a skill, or where they have no skills. And so what I do is like I just give the words for kids who complete an entire row or an entire column. And then that way they're kind of driven to push themselves a little bit. And we can talk about how I do the words in the classroom too. I'm not necessarily talking about a piece of candy. But that's no betting. And they get immediate instant feedback. If they're making mistakes, it gives them a little lesson to go back through and reread, explains the content. And I basically used it almost like independent study. The first maybe 5 to 10 minutes of writing every day. You guys go in, if you're ready, you can just go for it. And their goal was to get a whole column or a whole row, the green color or whatever. And they basically master the skill set. But you could do it with, we're working on this skill this week, I'm going to give you this quiz this week, or this assessment this week, and you can dole it out that way. But it has the, essentially like a little guide for you. Super fun and handy.
How much does it cost?
Zippo.
Because when I look at the site, it said there were some things.
They're working on a premium version, I think.
Yeah, but because right now it says that there are very few things that are free, and then the rest of it, like dialogue, which is really important, and stuff like that, that's all premium.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it now for the summer. I found, the content that I was using was all free and there was plenty.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's changed, so it might be worth looking into.
Okay.
If I had to pay for no red ink, there's only a couple grammar practice things out there that are really solid. I might do it if I had to. It'd be dependent on how much it was for the or something. But no red ink is a great site. So then what's next? Oh, Dreambox. The district pays for Dreambox. We do those in Dreambox. So Dreambox is really, really good for number sense. It's adapted, it works with kids. But I think you have to have a site license. You can have a bunch of seats to use it. So that's one that we use. It's really great for which is basically practices for a really number sense item specifically.
It was really good with the kids that don't understand that.
Yeah, it does a lot of that graphic representation. Charts and graphs and images and double number lines. It's just a lot of good number sense items, which is hard to find in my world. So anyway, SumDog is the one we use for just the skill and drill. There is SumDog has the premium that you can log in and sign up for. But even just the free stuff is fabulous. They can still sign in. It still tracks them. You can go in and look at your kids and have them join a class. Highly recommend SumDog. It's pretty motivating for them. They love the games. So there's like 20 or 30 different games of whatever content they're working on, they can play inside of the game. And so they learn pretty quick. how to choose games that give them questions faster, because they're always trying to up their stats and stuff. So that's what we use a lot of the time for just to throw in kill math practice. You guys use Spelling City at all? I said Spelling City. Spelling City I first got because of spelling lists. I got my spelling list into it. I could go at no pace. I was just going on to let a score of whatever on the previous list. They have all the lists right out the get-go, and that's what I used it for. But it's also got a premium version where you have access to a couple extra games. But in the free version, you can do spelling and also vocabulary. So I started off just doing spelling lists, and that was it. But then what I started doing was taking, like I would take like assignments in it, and put those words, those in Spelling City, and use it for vocabulary. Not so much for spelling, but more for the word meanings. So I would use a list here as an intro to vocabulary or as an assessment for vocabulary.
Yeah, because I've been on a lot of vocabulary. That would be cool to take that off and teach that. So what kind of feedback is it used for how well
So they get a score and you get a grade book. And I think we might pay for my school might have paid for the premium fees for those extra grades, I'm not sure. But I'm pretty sure that you get the grade book whether or not you have it.
Would you say it's geared more for elementary, or is it? Okay.
You can, yeah. You can make your own list, and the games are just games. They're just games. I mean, yeah, some of them are better than others. Most of them are really good. There's a couple silly ones. But the vocabulary piece became more important to me than the spelling piece. Spelling list is not good for parents. It's just the one thing parents can do successfully with their kids. It's easy for them. And that's a lot of why we do spelling. Spelling good yourself, right? Spelling is a visual skill. Writing them down a million times is this much helpful. Reading a book that hasn't is this much helpful. Spelling was primarily a punishment. I didn't learn to spell by those things my teachers made me do. 10 marks. If you're a math teacher, you need to hook up on 10 marks. This is what's up.
Oh, yeah.
So, 10 marks is the website, same deal, freemium model. A bunch of free content, some other stuff you can pay for. I just use the free version. Amazing. So 10 marks works like this. You build a class. And again, this is just the free part. You build a class, and you get access to one grade level of math standards and then a couple of folders outside of grade level. When you pay for it, one of the things that happens is you have access to all of them. You can run it where you give kids assignments. They go to that assignment and it's 10 or 20 questions. It's all straight out Common Core. Straight out Common Core. So you pick your standard, you pick the assignments you want to do, you decide if it's going to be a short one, 20 questions, and then the assignment to the students. They get a little code they sign in with, and they do the assignment, but while they're doing the assignment, there are 3 hints and a video for every single problem there is. But because they're stuck, they can look at the hints. They can watch the video. So my rule was when they're doing 10 marks, either they're answering the question, they're watching the video, or they're controlling it. One of those two things should be happening all the time. So as I would walk around the room, when you see a kid just looking at a screen that's got a problem, they don't have the hints, they don't have the video, they don't have the writing or work happening. They're not doing it. This is how I do it. It wasn't a disruptor. I wasn't going to happen. But in 10 marks, they get immediate feedback. They can get problems partially incorrect. So in other words, they may have done some part of it, some part of it incorrect. Some of the problems was multiple-step problems. Like if you look at the Parker items, you know how they'll have a problem, and then this, but it's all connected. Those, I mean, if you're like trying to find more of those problems to get in my kids, well, 10 marks is the motherboard on core items. Right? So we use it that way, and the kids can watch the videos at home or whatever. I can give the assignment, they can work on it as an implementation, they can work on it at home, they can work on it at school, but they have immediate feedback at all stages. After they're done with the assignment, it says you got, 8 out of 10 correct. You can go back And you can rework the problems you missed or got partially incorrect. The hints and the videos are still available to the kids. So they get that second go at it. And then I get both scores. The pay version is adaptive. So the kids do some kind of role play assessment and you start them off at a certain spot. And then it adjusts to them and they go from there. The free version that I use, I have to assign the problems and practice items. 10 marks is huge because of the way the problems are built. So when you go into 10 marks, you actually see it's so parkish. You know, they have the same graphs and charts all over the place. Number lines, open number lines, double number lines. All those pieces that I'm trying to find to get into my math right now are here and in the free version. 10 marks is huge.
And they have the explanations too, like,
Right.
here's an answer, which one of these explanations is the reason why that's the right answer?
Yeah, the questions are good. Really good. I haven't found a bag of questions this good in works. So, and it's nice. Definitely nice for kids.
Do you use it as a quiz or an assessment?
Yes. I use it across the board. I use it in all different ways. I use it sometimes to introduce a topic. I use it as a pre-assessment. I use it as formative assessment. I use it as post-assessment. It just kind of depends. It's just good quick data. It also will look at your whole class, you know, per standard, and you can start to make decisions about where your instruction should go next. There's a lot of handy things. Does anybody not know Brain Pop? Everyone knows Brain Pop? Brain Pop is super fun. So Brain Pop, you know, you go and you watch the video. There's a couple different quizzes. There's a practice one and a real one. I'm trying to convince them to change the item order. Because right now it's so easy to cheat, right? If you use Brain Pop, you can go and you can watch the videos as many times as you want, and then the quiz, the practice quiz and the grade quiz are the same quiz. And the items are in the same order every single time. So what my kids did was cheat. Right? They watched the video once because they knew Mr. Moore was watching them. And then they go and they take the quiz, the practice quiz, and they just memorize the 10 answers. They just tried until they got it right. They just guessed until they got it right. Okay. They go to question number 2. They tried until they got it right. C. All right, let's go for the third question. Maybe the third question, so they got it right. C. Okay. And they memorized them all. So they knew all the 10 answers. And then they get their perfect score, and then they go on. But to do that, watch the video. There are the questions about it. They had to go through that quiz at least 2 or 3 times. By the time it's all said and done and they've cheated to get their perfect score, I win. Right? Because they just reviewed the content 4 or 5 times to do it. So I get that it's not a true assessment of their learning. However, it's multiple exposures. And I'll take that any day of the week. So Brain Pop used to do, in the beginning, was when you took the grading quiz, you had to send an email with your score. So you had to put your teacher's email address, and then you had to send an email to the teacher, and that's how the teacher would get the scores. Then they would do this gradebook thing. But then I got smart. What I started having kids do is you pass the quiz, and then you screenshot your score. Take the picture of your screenshot and put it in a blog post that has your written reflection. And now I just look at your blog post. I read your written reflection about the essential questions. I send a screenshot of